No public comment again. Anybody signed up? Boy, it got off easy.
All right, you are. What?
It is 7 minutes past 7, and we have returned from executive session to our, continue with our public session. If we could please call the roll.
Ms. Jordan?
Here.
Mr. Spicer?
Here.
Dr. Collins?
Here.
Ms. Anderson?
Here.
Mr. Ryder?
Present.
Ms. Fitzgerald is excused. Ms. Corsones?
Here.
Mr. Fitzpatrick?
Yeah.
Mr. Lamb?
Here.
And stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
We do have 2 actions coming out of executive session. I will be looking for motions on each of the resolutions. First, we have BOE 46, a dual agreement. Be it resolved that the board hereby authorizes its president, along with the superintendent of schools, to execute a probation extension agreement with employee number 4225 as presented to the board at this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of accepting BOE 46?
Aye.
Any opposed? BOE 46 is passed. BOE 47, a medical examination directive. Be it resolved that the superintendent of schools is hereby authorized to direct employee number 4225 to a comprehensive medical examination and evaluation by the school physician, including psychiatric and/or examinations and evaluations as recommended by the school physician in accordance with the provisions of Section 913 of Education Law.
So moved.
And be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby directs employee number 4225 submit their medical records from the last 2 years, if any, to the designated physicians at or before such examinations or evaluations.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of BOE 47?
Aye.
Any opposed? BOE 47 is also passed. That brings us to our student recognition, I believe. Dr. Catalino, who are you?
I believe that Coach Q is going to talk a little bit about our athletes of the month who couldn't be here tonight, but he's here to represent them.
Good evening, Dr. Paolino, Ms. Anderson, board, administrators. I'm Coach Johnson, Coach Q, Quentin Johnson. I'm here for Varsity Club and the Athletic Council. We do, I don't think this is on. Maybe it is, okay. I don't think I need it. We do Athlete of the Month, so our coaches vote on our Athletic Council, and then our Varsity Club. We try and select 2 athletes each month to honor. Unfortunately, both of them could not be here tonight. One of them, a track and field athlete, is at a meet right now, and the other one, a bowling athlete, had to work and they could not make it. I will, however, accept these certificates on their behalf. So I'll go first with varsity bowling. A 10th grade captain, Samantha Schmitterer. She's the Triple Crown winner of Section 9. I'm not too familiar with bowling, but it's a pretty big deal. High average of 200, a high series of 691, and a high game of 288. So that's in the entire section. So these are stats and information that we get from their coaches. So again, I'm not too familiar, but it sounds pretty good. If you added up all my games in my life, I might have those scores. I don't know. The team, the girls bowling team, qualified for the state meet as a team, and then as individual in Section 9 composite team. So she qualified as a team member and individually for the state bowling tournament. So congratulations to Samantha. And then our next athlete, male athlete, boys indoor track and field, Logan Manor. Logan's been a part, so these are bios from their coaches, has been a major part of the success of the indoor track team. This winter, he broke the 200-meter school record that was set 2 years ago. He also is a member of the school record-holding 4x200 relay, which just qualified for the state meet. In addition to his success in track, he achieved the New York State standard in the long jump with a personal best of 21 feet and 7 inches. He did miss qualifying for the state meet in the long jump, but at Section 9 championships, he was second in the long jump, 55-meter dash, and a member of the winning 4x200 relay. He's been a member of the 4x200 relay, which has reset the school record 3 times this season, and the team qualified for the New York State championships in March. His contributions helped lead the boys team to their first ever Section 9 indoor championship, and then a little bit after this, at the national meet, him and the relay team qualified for All-American status. So congratulations to senior Logan Manor. So thank you very much.
Do you want him to get the certificate?
You can distribute this for us?
Yes. It's the Academy Awards. You can't be here, I'll take it.
Thank you, Quentin. That brings us to public participation. Is there anyone in the public that would like to address the board? Brings us to the approval of the minutes from the March 5th meeting.
So moved. Second.
Any discussion on the minutes from March 5th? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So the minutes from March 5th have been approved, and we are now at the superintendent's report.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Okay, so first on our superintendent's report, we have our Assistant Superintendent for Business and Operations, Mrs. Carbon, with our budget presentation.
Good evening. As you all know, we are still waiting for the New York State budget to pass, but while we've been waiting, we have been working diligently to fine-tune our numbers and look at where we are and where we need to be. Just for the public, for anyone who was not here for the rollover presentation, our budget development process is still continuing. We've already rolled over our current year budget expenses. We've predicted the revenues to the best of our ability. We're still waiting for final state aid numbers, but we do have the executive budget, which has been quite low. We've looked at employee salaries and benefits. We've looked at all of our costs at this point, line item expenditures, looking at programs, which we are still doing, adjusting revenue estimates for our what's called expense-based aids, which are state aid categories that the revenue is based on what we've spent the previous year. So fine-tuning those estimates from the executive budget and working towards balancing our expenditures and our revenues while we wait for them. So major changes in our preliminary revenue budget for 2025-26. Our current state aid increase is $5.3 million, but this is inclusive of all of our expense-based aids that I just spoke about. Our actual foundation aid, which is our primary state aid category from the state itself, based on enrollment and other factors, that was a minimum of 2%, which we have not seen in quite some time, and that increase was about a little over $1 million. Our tax levy increase is $8.2 million. It's not the maximum allowable levy, and we will speak to that in a few slides. We've had a decrease in interest income, not knowing what the economic landscape is going to look like in terms of rates. We need to be as conservative as possible so we don't have surprises. Reduction in pilot income. We've had a pilot end unexpectedly mid-year, so that income has come off of our revenue estimates for next year. And then reduction in other revenues of $1.7 million. Most of that is the fact that for 25-26, we don't have a budget transferred a budgeted transfer from the debt service reserve. Just to refresh everyone's memory, in this budget, 24-25, we transferred $1.4 million, which we had budgeted for 23-24. We did not need it because of the interest income we received that year. So then we carried over that transfer for this budget. So our total revenue increase right now is $10.8 million. And this is our draft revenue budget, starting with our tax levy of $125 million, say $800,000. Our pilots, our major categories, interest on investments of $1.5 million, going down to our foundation aid of $68.9 million according to the executive budget. We hope that when the final budget is passed and enacted, that will increase, but we're working with what we have for now. Our expense-based state aid revenues that I spoke to are about $36 million. So as you see, last year, that revenue stream was $32 million. So that's most of our increase there. Medicaid reimbursement and transfers from other funds, our food service fund and our federal funds, for a total of $236.7 million. So now our tax cap calculation, just to refresh the community's memory. The 5 main factors in this long calculation that we use for our maximum allowable levy, it starts with the current year tax levy. So wherever we set this year, our estimate started with the 24-25 levy. From there, the next important factor is the tax-based growth factor, which comes from New York State real property tax. Then inflation, otherwise known as CPI. Pilot payments are a factor. And then exclusions, our capital and retirement exclusions. This year we have no retirement exclusion, so the exclusion for what we pay for debt service. Our maximum allowable levy has shifted since my last presentation. And this isn't giving me the red, so starting with this year's levy of $117.6 million, the next area, our tax-based growth factor, that has increased to by 96 basis points, so 20 over last year. That is a factor in the increase. Then our pilots, the change in pilots, they've been reduced, which is a factor. And we have our exclusions. So our maximum allowable levy this year is $126,147,000, and that is a 7.27% increase over this current year. And the dollar amount of the increase is $8.6 million. Going to foundation aid that I just spoke about, I took a snapshot of our foundation aid history just because this year's executive budget number was so surprising. Starting with the 1920 school year, so looking at 6 years through 24-25. And as you can see, the first column was just, and I know some people do look at our runs, so being able to trace back. That first column is the base that the state used to calculate the next year's foundation aid. The important column next is the current year aid. So you can see how it trended from 1920 at $46.8 million, steadily increasing, a significant increase from 22-23 to 23-24, and that was the first year that the formula as it was fully funded, and then the very next year it shifted. Then 23-24 to 24-25, not as much of an increase. Last year, the formula was shifted, the CPI factor, the inflation factor was shifted, which resulted in just under $1 million less revenue for Kingston last year. But what I was interested in blue is the dollar change year over year and how that trended. And as you can see, the past 4 years have been more significant. And then the percent change year over year through where we are now. Excuse me. The executive budget in dark blue, as I stated before, is $68.9 million, an increase of $1.35 million, which is a 2% increase, which is the minimum increase in the governor's proposal for foundation aid. And just some averages, because just to get an idea of how it trended, because it was so different. So I just wanted to share that analysis with you. Our 7-year average, even though I'm only showing 6, was 6.6% increase. Our 5-year average was 7.67, and the past 3 years, that average was 9.73, so we were trending in the right direction. I know many of you who've watched many of you on the board have served for a number of years, but the community who've been watching have heard Dr. Padalino and the team speak about how Kingston has not been fully funded, so that full phase-in I left there so that you could see our actual aid compared to what we would have gotten if it had been fully funded, even though the state eventually got there. So that's what that column represents. And then just to give a graphic to what I just spoke to, it speaks volumes when you see it in a graph. So the green bars represent the dollar increase of our foundation aid year over year. And then in blue, we have the percent increases. So you can see the trend both ways. We were heading in the right direction. We got fully funded 23, 24, and then we went the other way. Now, also, we do have shifting demographics in our district that make us look wealthier in terms of our assessed values, but we still have other factors that are significant. So now going to the expenses. Our total expense increase is just under $16 million, $15.9 million. And the major changes, salaries and benefits, $7.6 million. Debt service of $3.2 million. Transportation of approximately $4 million, but this estimate I do expect to change. We are looking very closely at our transportation projections, but also we currently have an RFP out for transportation for next year as we speak. So we will be receiving those proposals next week and going over them to see where our numbers will sit. So I expect this $4 million number to change. Special education, $1 million, and then just the net impact of smaller adjustments across all budget categories, $15,000. And also just speaking back to transportation, and I have a future slide about that, so I'll wait until you see the trend. And here we are. So what I took two of our largest expense categories that have shifted over time are transportation and out-of-district tuition expenses. We've had quite a significant shift, especially coming out of COVID. So I'm providing a snapshot over the past 5 years and the year that we're sitting in. So you can see where we've gone from the 1920 school year. The blue column is our transportation expenses. The orange column is our out-of-district tuition. So we started off in 1920 at $5.8 million for transportation. Following the trend of transportation, in 2021, we've gone up to $8.6 million. 21-22, we saw a little breather to $8.1 million during COVID. But then 22-23, we had a significant increase of $10.9 million. That year, we had a lot of changes with our contractors and rates. 23-24, our transportation expenses rose to $13 million. Just to recap of that year, we had our transportation director worked very diligently to realign some of our routes, also getting additional service to fill in the service gaps that we had because some of our contractors were suffering. So we had increased expenses. We added runs to fix some of the service issues that we had previously. And then this year to 24-25, we project our transportation expenses to be just under $16 million, $15.9 million. This year also, we've had significant increases from our contractors because after many years of not paying drivers what they can make elsewhere, and with the shortage, the salary issues had to be addressed. So when contracts have gone out to RFP, now we've had 2 years of going out to RFP where in Kingston we went many years without needing to do so. We are now seeing that increase in addition to service changes and increases that we have to make in service just to accommodate our students and make sure that we're getting them to school as efficiently and safely as possible. So this is our transportation trend. In orange, our out-of-district tuitions. In 1920, we were just under $17 million basically $17 million. Then in 2021, we rose to $18.2 million. 21-22 again, just a slight bump to $18.8 million. And then 22-23, we saw a significant increase to $19.8 million. Rates were changing, and also our students, as you recall, coming through the pandemic, the tail end out of it, more gaps, more needs being met and needing to be sent out of district. And 23-24, we sat at $23.9 million for our out-of-district tuitions. And this year, our projection is 24.2. Our classification rate is about 22% of our student population. So that is another trend that we've been watching and looking at. So in terms of our forecast and making sure our budget estimates are accurate and meeting the needs, these are some of the things that we've been looking at. So our draft budget summary, the 24-25 budget that we're in now, $231,562,000. Our tax levy this year was $117.6 million, which was a 3.2% increase. Our draft revenue budget is currently at $246,872,500. Our draft expense budget is at $251 million, basically $500,000. So our current budget gap that we're working to close is $4.6 million. The maximum tax levy, oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, I'll take, sorry.
Yeah, let him finish.
Our maximum tax levy is $126,147,400, which is a 7.27% increase, as we saw in the calculation. The proposed tax levy at this point is $125 million, say $800,000, which is a 6.97% increase. The difference between the two is $355,800. So for the following budget, the 26-27 budget, we would start off at the $125,800,000 number. Our revenue summary. So our preliminary revenues are at $236,622,000. And adding to that assigned fund balance of $5.5 million, which is the same level that we added this year. Then a tax reduction reserve transfer of $750,000. We also made that the same amount, a lesser amount this year, $350,000. And retirement reserves to make payments against our retirement payments of $4 million. So the draft revenue budget bringing us to $246.9 million. But this is where we are in this moment. We are still working. So our next steps, continue to evaluate projections and services across the district, and continuing to develop scenarios to implement when the New York State budget is enacted. I just also want to share with you some of the steps that, some of just the environment that we're in for those who are listening who may not be aware. I know you all are. First, our post-COVID new normal. We have been, like districts across the state, across the country, developing what our new normal is going to be. Student needs, instruction, supports, and operations. And we put in place many supports over the course since we've come out of COVID and continue to come out of COVID. And some supports, it takes time to see how effective they are and what is working and what isn't. And that's the work that we've been doing over the past 2 to 3 years. Our student needs continue to increase. And we have a changing economic environment, which everyone knows, and the climate. So speaking to the foundation aid schedule that I showed, and smaller class sizes. So what are we doing? Our focus as we've been doing this work in looking at both our revenues and our expenses and the services, we've been laser focused on enhancing instruction to improve student needs. You saw the presentations for CKLA, the new curriculum that will be rolled out K-8. We have been working to maintain those necessary student supports that were put in place and looking at them closely to make sure that we are getting the results that we intend. And we've been working to position the district for financial stability while promoting success for all of our students. So that balance and those conversations are what we've been having as we are looking at the numbers. We've been doing a district-wide assessment of our resources, both instructional and non-instructional. We've taken a deeper dive, a deeper evaluation of our support services, as I stated before, and we've been making data-driven decisions. So part of the time that we've taken is because we've been pulling data. We've been asking data from our principals, from our departments, looking through trends in our own records, and also revisiting them, and then putting them together in the landscape of a district vision instead of just elementary or just secondary. So that work does take time because we have been working on a very diligently and on a more detailed level, that deep dive that we need. And identifying and creating efficiencies in operations and programming. So doing that work as we go, and some changes we have made and have already made, but we won't see the fruits of those financially until next year and the following year, but that's the work that's been happening. And our primary expense changes that we spoke about, salaries and benefits, transportation, special education. So all of these, because they do go hand in hand. One of the reasons I laid transportation and special education out together, and I should have said this when the slide was up, because our students, when they're placed out of district, we have to transport them there. And transportation can be expensive, and some of our students do travel a distance. So this is the work we're doing. We're continuing to work while we wait for a budget. We're not just waiting. We're looking again and revisiting to see where else we can fine tune or realign things, and then create scenarios since we are not sure what to expect. We're hopeful, but we have to be prepared as well. So this is where we are. Any questions?
Mr. Ryder, you had a question?
I
You
think it
lost
got
it.
answered because I was just mistaken, but just the delta between our maximum tax levy and what we are looking at is about 355,000.
Yes.
I think when I first looked, it was like, in my head, it was 6 or 7 million, but I was looking at the 24, 25 tax levy. I'm always concerned that we're, I get that you balance, like, we have to be fiscally responsible for the taxpayers, but there's also,
How much we leave on the table.
we leave on the table for future years. So
Yes.
that's always,
And that
and I
is-
know you look at that, and that's a big part of,
We do.
thank you.
Thank you.
Mrs. Corzone.
Thank you for this great presentation. Just wanted to reiterate what I thought you heard. The increase in out-of-district placement is both due to the number of students as well as the cost of the tuition. So it's both?
In terms of the increased amount that we've been
Yeah.
spending, yes. There was a significant increase. I started in July 2022. So the 22-23 school year, there was definitely a significant increase in tuitions. That was unexpected, so then we've had both
Right.
going on.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Lamb, and then Mrs. Jordan.
More than anything, I'd like to thank you because number one, it's going through line by line and everything is tedious and but it's going to be advantageous at the end for next year and the future. So I get it. I'm worried. All right, optimistically worried at this point. But thank you for that work and what you've done for us and making it plain and simple.
Thank you, but I have to say, this has been all hands on deck. So the cabinet team, of course, Dr. Padalino, Mr. Reinhardt, and the principals, this has been all hands on deck. People have been digging up data and pulling out data and digging up things, and we've been looking under rocks as a team. And then in the business office team, it's really been all hands on deck. Thank you.
Mrs. Jordan.
I was going to also say, I'm aware that everybody here has been working so hard, and I really appreciate that hard work as a group, as a team for the district. But I'm also always trying to understand this myself, and I know that there might be people who watch this presentation. And going back to Mr. Ryder's point about the differential between going to the maximum tax levy limit and perhaps a little lower, because we always try to, just can you again so eloquently explain to people why that matters going forward?
The simple reason why it matters, and thank you for asking, Mrs. Jordan, is because how much revenue the district has, we all stay focused, I do it too, on the percent increase. And I will definitely share a slide that I've used in previous presentations to show this at my next presentation, but the percent difference year over year will be the same, but what's different is the money. So if we leave $355,000 on the table for the 25-26 budget, when we're creating the 26-27 budget, we will be, before we even start the calculation, we will have $355,000 less revenue to work with for our students and our district for that budget year, and that's why it matters. There's a carryover and a compound effect.
And I think people have to understand that, because we have tried so hard to balance the needs of the taxpayers with the needs of the district, and that's, I think, really key until they change the formulation, which will never.
I have a question, and I'm not sure, Dr. Padalino, if it's for you. It's about the out-of-district. When the new BOCES converts that Port Ewan site into special ed, do we anticipate that we will have fewer out-of-district?
So, out of district, so those students include BOCES students out of district,
Okay.
but there will be a level of savings sending them there. And that's
Okay.
one of the reasons BOCES is doing what they're doing, is because Dr. Schenker and his team at BOCES recognized the demand for these placements for students who are exhibiting needs well beyond what we've experienced, prior to 2020. So that was really one of the motivating factors behind BOCES looking to go to iPark 87 and changing Fort Ewing into basically entirely special ed programming for out-of-district students. So, yes.
Okay. Mr. Ryder and then Dr. Collins.
And I know this isn't something that can happen overnight, but when you start to see that growth, I think we've had conversations about looking to see any of these services that we can bring in-house. And that doesn't help the 25, 26 budget, but if it continues to grow exponentially like it has, I think it becomes more and more feasible to do.
And I think one of the things that at least one of our new our director of special ed, Ms. Long, has been looking at is what can we bring back in-house? And is that, it may sound crazy thing to say, but is that economically feasible? So about 10 years ago, we had the same exercise and came out with, it wasn't. We actually would lose money. And again, looking at things like legacy costs, looking at things like retirement, looking at things like personnel, and a lot of the individualized services that many of these students need and the cost around those. So, yeah, but we're going to continue to look at that. You're right, that $24 million is a huge number to then turn around and say, oh, well, it would cost us more, but we're looking at it for sure.
Dr. Collins.
I was actually thinking along the same lines as both of you and wondering too, because it's those students, we pay the out-of-district tuition costs and the transportation, and so keeping those in-house saves us on both potentially, is that,
Yes.
if I understand that correctly, so it seems like, yes, there would be a lot of savings. if we
Mhm.
put them in-house.
Do we have the classroom space to bring them back?
I mean, we have options and opportunities that we would look at. And again, I think looking at it, after you factor in aid and everything else, looking at it holistically will be eye-opening for everyone to realize that it's probably not the kind of savings that we think it would be. And again, like I said, we've looked at this multiple times. We've actually done it with some smaller programs and ended up having to go back to sending them to BOCES or to other programming.
Other districts in our county having the same problem? Is it something that we can work hand in hand with the other districts and each district offer some of the services?
That's exactly what we do with BOCES. That's exactly what BOCES does. So our students who go to a specialized class at BOCES, whether it's Port Ewing or at Anna Devine, are with students from New Paltz, students from Ellenville, students from Onteora. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to take a program that we couldn't offer ourselves because it's one student. And BOCES can put together 7 students, 10 students from the 7 school districts and do it, in a reasonable fashion. So that's kind of exactly what we've been doing with BOCES. And around the table at our BOCES superintendents meetings every month, this is a conversation. Every superintendent is has these issues.
Any other questions or comments?
I think just a comment talking about this particular population, my greatest concern as we look through this is, the replication of an effective program for the student. Because these are students that have very, very specific
Needs.
Mm-hmm. And, we want to be certain we're providing, I recognize it's a huge cost, but we do need to meet their needs. And they may be very specialized, and it may not be something that we're able to have the expertise to provide either.
And with the small numbers, I was saying that's where it becomes not really cost effective to do it, especially with the number of other services that many of these students need. And I think I said this the other day. I mean, some of these students have transportation that cost us $1,000 a day.
Mm-hmm.
So that's $180,000. That's before they walk into a classroom, before they receive any instruction, before they receive any special services, OT, PT, speech, anything they need. That's $180,000. That student right off the bat. That's one kid. So these are it's expensive situation, for sure.
Thank you very much. I do understand that this will be in our library,
Yes.
because I think many of us would like to take a closer look. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not clapping for the deficit, just for the
The presentation.
presentation.
I just have two very small things. I know we have some board reports, so I'll look for the chairs of those committees to those reports. Just another announcement, spring break is coming up. It's April 14th through the 23rd. All right, so just everyone knows that's through the Tuesday. We'll return to, or through the Wednesday, we'll return to school on April 24th for the 24th and 25th, which are Thursday, Friday. And then we've taken those other 2 extra days and we've added them to Memorial Day break, which is 22nd through the 26th, with a return to school on the 27th. So it's just the change in the calendar. And Ms. Jordan.
I've heard people waiting for their preschoolers to come out, and there's a lot of confusion still about this. Is there a way of doing another e-blast
Yep.
or something?
Absolutely.
Just to help parents from...
Yeah, and I think I think we could do that, and also I think maybe we'll talk with our principals. Sometimes the message comes much more clearly from their building principals than it does when they look at our textbooks.
There's just a lot of confusion.
Any other?
That's all I have for tonight.
Okay. That brings us to the Board of Education Committee reporting, beginning with policy. Mrs. Jordan.
Okay. I want to thank the board for being flexible enough to look at the policies that were in their library. One of them is the Education of Homeless or Temporarily Housed Children and Youth Policy 5151. The old policy that we've had, and I think was reviewed on the, in 23, has been updated by Dr. Felicello. Thank you so much. And recommendations from NISA NISPA were considered, and what it does is it includes all of the latest legislation requirements. And so rather than plug that into our old policy, it's just cleaner to use the policy that has everything in it. So that's what you have before you. And the only thing that is not included in that policy are the cross-references, which will be the same as the ones in our old policy. And that is also in your library. So the cross-references are 5150 school admissions, 5420 student health services, 5500 student records, and then a lengthy list of references. So if we are able to pass that tonight, it would be very helpful because we have students that require these services and we want to make them as up-to-date as possible.
So moved.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of 5151, Education of Homeless and Temporary Housed Youth?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you. And the next thing we have is, we don't currently have a 504 policy that covers everything up to date. And so that was also in your library. And it's quite extensive. I would recommend that we were supplied that by our attorneys, and I recommend that we adopt that tonight. But I also would like to recommend that the policy committee review it, because my instinct is that we should separate out the students from the personnel. So for tonight, I would like to move that policy as it is, because again, it does have legal references that are up to date, which are very important for us to include, but I think we're going to put it on we might not be able to put it on this Friday's agenda, but we can put it on for May and make sure that we look more closely at what we think we should do. And we'll come back to you with that. So I would move that 504 policy be adopted.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor of adopting 5020.3, students with disabilities?
Aye.
Any opposed? So 5020.3 is approved. That brings us to audit and, Mrs. Jordan, did you have anything else?
No, I didn't.
Okay.
We're meeting Friday. Sorry.
Mr. Ryder, audit and finance.
Sure. So we met on March 25th. I attended virtually, so I'd like to thank Mr. Lamb for taking over as chair for that meeting. Meeting was called to order at 9 a.m. We approved the minutes. We discussed the treasurer's claim reports and fund reports and voted to accept these reports. There was a discussion around a new club charter, which I believe is in the library to vote on tonight for future business leaders. Ms. Corsone's asked about the number of clubs at the district and the high school and middle school levels, and Mr. Quisnell was going to get that breakdown to us at the next committee. The Q-Star internal audit report. So the area chosen for this audit was Ed Law 2D. Mr. Baudet wrapped up the field work last week, and the draft audit is being put together. We had decided there was a question about when we would have him present the audit report, and we decided that that would happen in August of this coming year, as opposed to trying to rush it and do it virtually in June. We had discussions of the 25-26 budget. I'll just say, I think there was robust presentation about that tonight, so I'm not gonna go into too much of what the discussion was. It was very similar. There was talk about how our debt service schedule affects the tax levy increase and the calculations. The only piece of old business was Ms. Corsone's asked about when Bartev, the housing director from the city of Kingston, was going to come back and do a presentation around some formulas and scenarios that we had requested. And I'm going to set it up so that not Thursday, April 10th probably, for our next meeting, but the May meeting they'll come in.
And that was Dan Baker, the tax assessor, right?
Dan Baker came in last time because Bartev was not available.
Okay.
It will be Bartev that comes in and presents in May. I would butcher his last name, so I'm not even going to.
Any questions or comments from Mr. Ryder? Thank you. That brings us to the Facilities Committee. The Facilities Committee met on March 25th. We had a combination of remote and in-person attendance, and it was well represented. We approved the minutes from February 25th after amending. Our update, this was probably one of the fastest meetings. I think we were done in 22 minutes. So there are not a lot of updates. The Smart Schools project is still in the change order phase. That work continues during spring break. The lockdown system here at Mahar will be tested, and the energy performance, the annual verification reviews will be conducted as required. Our capital project, Phase 1 demolition at Edson and Bailey will begin during spring break. Removal of ceiling tiles and asbestos abatement. The staff has been informed, and the major work at those two sites will begin in June. Phase 2, still waiting for approval from SED. Phase 2A, comments were sent to SED, or comments were received from SED, and responses have been submitted. The design documents for GW and Chambers in Phase 3 have been completed. So that's kind of an overview of where we're at in our capital project. Dr. Padalino reported to the committee that he has recommended to the board that the project for the athletic field master plan be pushed to a later date. This recommendation was made due to budget concerns and the impact that this project would have on taxpayers. The scope of the project will continue to be investigated, so there will be no vote in May. Deed Stadium is underway for the spring season. The side field for practice will not be usable until the grass fills in and the ground dries out. ADA hardware has been installed on doors. And a distance, I think this was reported to us, a district maintenance worker has been assigned at the site from 2 to 10 p.m. daily. And security will be present for contests. The senior class at Kingston High School has inquired about the possibility of an electronic lawn sign to be installed on the Broadway lawn. The student organizations at the high school have been raising money to cover the cost of the sign. Our maintenance department has investigated the installation details. So the committee agreed that we should give the students a green light to continue to work towards that project. We still have some playgrounds in old business that are still waiting on punch list parts. And in new business, Mr. Bogart is investigating options for vehicle replacements for electric or hybrid alternatives. 5 district vehicles are to be replaced within the next year. We adjourned at 3:53 and our next meeting is April 29th. Questions? Comments?
I have a question.
Anthony and then Mr. Ryder.
I was hoping to know how many of these vehicles the district has.
Our total number of vehicles?
Yeah.
No, we
Which
had that.
different kinds?
35? I think we have, I have that, but I think we have 30. If you include our maintenance trucks, our food service trucks, I mean, most of our vehicles are those kind of things, food service trucks or maintenance trucks. We do have, we have 5 vehicles. 2 of them, one of them we've taken off the road, I believe. But the majority of them are either our maintenance trucks or our food service. I think there's 35.
Okay, well, so I mean, the food service, I know that's a lot different from, our operating budget, like how many of those versus the other ones, is it like half or?
The food service trucks?
Yeah.
Probably a quarter, actually. Most of our vehicles really are out of our maintenance.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because I know those are the ones that are significantly bigger, right? They
Right.
transport-
The bigger, we have plows on them, or those kind of things.
Mr. Ryder?
I don't know if this is appropriate here or new business, but your report just kind of sparked something in my head. So at Deeds, where the throwers practice discs, the vehicle got hit 2 days ago with an errant disc, and there's not a
No.
the fence isn't high enough.
Right.
So, and we don't block off the road or anything, so the coaches dealt with it, but I think we should, if Dylan could, or somebody could take a look at.
Yeah, I was informed of that.
Yeah.
They might have to put up netting.
Yeah, well, we
Yeah.
have the netting around the field itself, so we used to have nets on the fence itself, so I'll
I mean, Coach Cahill wasn't there that day, but like, I think somebody dealt with it,
Yeah.
but it was just somebody was parked there, so it could be as simple as coning those off walls or
Right.
throwing this
guy.
this guy.
As they spin through the air. Any other questions or comments?
First foul ball hitting first, but that's the first discus. It's been reported to me.
And you get hit with a discus, you know you've been hit. All right, that brings us to our consent agenda. Are there any items that trustees would like to have pulled from the consent agenda? Hearing none, if we could have a motion to accept the consent agenda.
Someone.
Any discussion? All in favor of accepting the consent agenda?
Aye.
Any opposed? So our consent agenda is approved. We do have a few donations, I think.
The Board of Education of the Kingston City School District hereby accepts with grateful appreciation the following generous donation. To Ernest Meyer Elementary School from the Meyer PTA, two donations totaling $1,162.99. To Robert Graves Elementary School from the Stewart Foundation, a donation of $400. To JFK Elementary School from Stewart Foundation, a donation of $250. And to Harry L. Edson Elementary School from the school store, a Walmart card and the amount of $25, and from Lake North, a picnic table valued at $50. So thank you for all the donations.
Thank you. Old business. Mrs. Corsones.
I just, at the last board meeting, I said that at this board meeting, I'd give a brief update on a meeting that Dr. Padalino, Ms. Anderson, and I had with the Ulster County IDA. We met with them on March 19th, and it was with the executive director and two of their board members, Mr. Ham and Mr. Kerwin. I may be butchering his last name, so I apologize. And thanks to Ms. Carbon, we had a list of the 19 projects that are current pilots that would be impacting our district next school year. I'll let the two of them chime in. I think it was an informative meeting. I think what we realized, obviously, as a school board, our purpose is very different than what the IDA's purpose is for the county. But they did encourage us that when there's a pilot that does come up that's going to impact the district, that we really should provide testimony to that effect, because they would consider taking those comments into account. So I'll work with Dr. Padalino and the administration as to how or what that might look like. And I encourage the two of them because they probably have additional things or thoughts to lend.
I just thought it was a really good meeting in the sense that it just opened the lines of communication between our organization and that organization. And several of the pilots were not IDA pilots, they were from other municipalities, yeah, right. So, and we were encouraged to participate in the process. Our voice is only going to be heard if we're there when we need to be there. So, it was good.
Yeah, I agree with Ms. Anderson. I think they got to hear how we think, and we got to hear how they think, and it just opened up that opportunity for conversation moving forward. So I thought it was productive.
Dr. Collins.
First, I just want to say thank you for holding that meeting. I think that is a couple of years overdue, and I really think it's important that we're building bridges and opening those lines of communication. So I think that's great. And I just wanted to follow up a little bit on the being part of the process and providing testimony. So in what capacity and in what part of the process are they asking for that? Does that mean if we learn of a pilot that we then submit a statement which may be about the impact on the district to them during their decision-making time, or what does that mean?
I think that, so whenever a pilot comes up for the industrial development, thank you, agency, we do get notification.
Right.
So we get notification here at the board clerk gets it. And one of the things that's important for everyone to know, that there has not been a pilot
For a while.
awarded through
IDA.
through IDA in 2 years. So it's been 2 years. So we haven't seen anything like that before. But I think they encourage us to come and speak to them and speak with them instead of kind of just talking over here or talking to Mr. Kimball or whoever we're going to talk to about it, to go, actually address them. And they said in the past they've taken a lot of that into account. I felt they were very genuine in their offer for us to participate in that way, and that they did value our input, and they value what we do. I mean, I think all three of them were parents, at one point parents of the students in this district, and they live here. So I think there's not I think they're very genuine about being considerate of our concerns.
Can I just ask one
Sure.
follow-up question? Along those lines, were they unaware of the impact on the district? In general, and I don't mean individual so much, but I'm trying to understand sort of how the trajectory of this has played out over the last few years and where the miscommunication lies, and
Yeah.
I wonder how much of it is miscommunication or lack of awareness or lack of knowledge. And
I don't think they were unaware. But I do think that they have their view of it is different than our view of it. Kind of
Fair.
as we've had made that conversation, but I don't think they were unaware.
Okay.
But I will say that, again, as most of the time we're having pilot conversations, our conversation did shift to talk about housing. And again, the IDA is not necessarily who we need to be talking to about that, because I think they have two that are old, that have been there for
Senior
ages.
citizens,
Yeah,
yeah.
they've been there for ages, so they've been on the books for ages. And we as a board, many years ago, agreed to, what's that? Yeah, we moved forward in support of that at one point. So, but it did shift to housing. And, I think as those housing projects come up with the idea, that's when we need to have those conversations. But they have nothing on the books right now. They've nothing that's been, they hadn't had a pilot in 2 years, and they really don't even have, I think he said they don't even have one in front.
In the pipeline,
No.
yeah.
Yeah, so,
Don't they have the one up on Golden Hill?
No,
that's not idea.
it's by right.
It's
Affordable housing is by right, and it's a state.
all I can say is it's going ahead and it looks nice. It's
Yeah.
gonna be, and it's
Yeah.
moving quickly, so.
But that's not through the idea.
Okay.
I think in November, when they changed their housing policy, they sent us letters. Did you guys?
And they have a whole new manual, basically,
Yeah.
a whole new handbook that is on their website that I started looking through after that meeting. So there's a lot of different things. They have changed many of the rules that they've put in place. I think they have a pretty new board.
They
and
do.
definitely
That's
a new
what the-
executive
Mhm,
director.
Yeah,
Director.
they do
Yeah.
have, the board has turned over fairly significantly, and I think they are in a different, they're looking through different eyes,
Mhm.
let's put it that way.
And I think that the new executive director is right on point,
Right.
so. Mr. Ryder, did you have a question?
It's
Or,
not really.
okay.
So
Okay.
I can ask it another time.
I just want to
Mrs.
follow
Jordan.
up with Dr. Collins. I really do appreciate that you had this meeting. I think it's really important that we continue to check in with them so that you kind of stay ahead of it. Because again, it's a negotiation. And so I just think that we have to remind them that they don't have to treat us the same way they treat the other taxing bodies.
Well, they have a public hearing on it before they approve anything, and that's what they encouraged us to participate, because our voice will be heard in that public hearing.
And we did bring up that exact thing of why does every taxing jurisdiction have to be dealt with in the same way? And they weren't opposed to that.
No,
Right.
You know,
they understood.
They just don't have anything in front of them right now to even start
So-
working on it.
Right. That's great, though, but it's very encouraging that it is a different kind of view.
Yeah. Thank you, Mrs.
Thank you.
Corzine. Any other old business? Any new business?
I'd like to make a motion to create a diversity, equity, and inclusion standing committee.
We have a motion, do we have a second? So without a second, we will not move forward on that motion. Any other new business? Public comment? No one to address the board? And board member announcements?
I have one announcement. If
Okay.
nobody else has
Yeah,
anything.
that's right.
And I'll get more information out to you, but May 3rd, which is a Saturday, the city will be holding the overall ribbon cutting for Dietz Stadium.
Okay.
So.
What date is that?
May 3rd, it's a Saturday. I'll send you the time, the date and everything else of that. Ms. Bondville's saying something to me, that's what.
1 o'clock. What? It's 1 to 3 p.m.
Oh, it's 1 to 3? Okay, so 1 to 3 p.m. at Dietz Stadium. There'll be a ribbon cutting with tours of the stadium, tours of the locker rooms, all those kind of things going on. So, the
Please, what time again?
1 to 3 p.m.
And the actual ribbon cutting is at 1:30. But there's a thing from 1 to 3.
A thing?
A thing. The whole thing.
I missed that.
My guess is there'll be food trucks.
At the stadium. Yes. Ribbon cutting for the stadium.
But yeah, that was, I'm sorry.
Okay, no. Good to know. Any other announcements? I will
I
call
move
for.
we adjourn.
I'll second that.
All in favor of adjourning?
Aye.
Thank you very much.
May 3rd, it's a Saturday.